I've been going through a phase in my fragrance hobby. I think I came into a full circle. I don't know how to draw a circle. I do think a lot of fragrance enthusiasts go through what I went through. We all start with this journey with a popular or a generic fragrance, designer fragrance usually, that's easy to get. Maybe for men, it might be fragrances like Dior Sauvage, Bleu de Chanel, CK1, Acqua di Gio. For women, it might be fragrances like Dolce & Gabbana Light Blue, Chanel Poison, Coco Mademoiselle, Mugler Alien, YSL Black Opium. You know what I mean. Then you realize there's more interesting fragrances still within the designer realm. Then you discover the world of niche and indie fragrances. Then you go down to the rabbit hole, realize you're no longer buying fragrances to smell good, but finding interesting fragrances for the sake of the experience, like 95% of zoologist perfumes. And then one day, you're dusting off your shelf and find your old bottle of Davidoff Cool Water, and you smell it and you realize how amazing it is. And that's where I am currently. To be honest, this year I collected tens and hundreds of niche fragrance samples so that I could perhaps make review videos about them, but I actually never did. I was fatigued. In fact, this year was not the year I bought perfumes, but the year I bought clothes. Way too much clothes. So now that the weather is a bit chilly, I started taking out my colder weather fragrances and realized how much I enjoy my collection already. And today I wanted to share a fragrance line, specifically one fragrance from that fragrance line that I really enjoy. This is the fragrance I come back to every year. And that fragrance is Hugo Boss, The Scent Private Accord. I know I don't usually show my bottles, so look at it. This is a real bottle, guys. Look at it. It's actually a decent looking bottle. Now, before you complain, because I know YouTube is complain tube, I know this is men's, so I also bought for her version for women's. So please, calm your tits. To be fair, I am comfortable wearing both and I find them both unisex. One does lean a bit more masculine, the other one does lean more feminine, but I truly believe these are unisex fragrances. I find it almost poetic that I'm talking about a Hugo Boss fragrance today. I think Hugo Boss fragrances, perfumes, and their fashion are sort of always there, but no one really cares about them. They're just there. Especially after this guy came out, like nobody cares about him. I find this particularly hilarious because I was actually in the midst of smelling and writing a review for Creed Aventus Cologne. And then the more I smelled it and the more I wrote about it, I realized how much I didn't like that fragrance. So I became stressed. And then I realized I probably should be writing reviews or making videos about fragrances that I care about and are excited about. So you guys can be excited about it too. So yeah, don't buy Creed Aventus Cologne. So where do I start with this fragrance? This is technically a flanker to a different fragrance. The original fragrance is called Hugo Boss The Scent, and every other year they released a flanker for this fragrance as well as for her version of each of those flankers. Now here's the problem. I understand from marketing aspect for releasing flankers and releasing for her versions of those flankers. But in reality, for her versions of the perfumes have no resemblance to the original. The notes are completely different. All men's version, however, are tied by a single note. Each flanker is a different take revolving around this single note, and that note is the maninka fruit. Now, before I start describing what this fruit is, because I'm sure most of you have never heard of this fruit, I'm gonna tell you a personal story. I have this friend who is white, and ever since I knew him, he loved to copy other people's cultures. One day he discovered that there is a Korean Chinese dish called jjajangmyeon, or in English, black bean noodles. Moving forward, I'm actually not gonna refer to this dish as black bean noodles because I realized a lot of English speakers shame and make fun of other people for speaking poor English or not speaking English or having a particular accent, especially when it comes to Asians. And then I realized the very same people refuse to try to speak words that are not in English because they don't know how to pronounce it. So you guys make fun of people for having the courage to speak your language, but you refuse to speak a single word from a different language because you're embarrassed and are a coward. What you need isn't a fragrance, but a freaking slap to your face and some humility. Anyway, so this friend wanted to try jjajangmyeon. But of course, not knowing what that is, he didn't go to a Korean Chinese restaurant. Instead, he bought a ramyeon version of it or instant noodle version of it, which obviously won't taste anything like the original. It's a poor, cheap remake of it. This is like buying Spam because you never had pork. So he took it home, cooked it without reading the instructions, of course. Now, if you know jjajangmyeon or the ramyeon version of it, also known as 짜파게티, you know this dish is a dry noodle, meaning there's no broth. But of course, this idiot decided to cook it with a gallon of water in it because back in college, he had a 99-cent Nissin or Maruchan instant noodle. He made this atrocity. He ate it. He obviously didn't like it because he had no other point of reference or any other dish he could compare it to, really. He couldn't finish it, so he gave it to his parents who also never had Korean food. And now his parents go around the town telling how disgusting Korean food is. I'm telling you this story for 3 reasons. 1, my friend is a fucking moron. 2, I just gave you a micro example of a societal phenomenon known as cultural appropriation. And you can see why this is so dangerous and has such a room for misunderstanding. 3, I never smelled maninka fruit before. I don't know what it tastes like. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what it smells like. So I'm giving you a warning in advance. What I know of this fruit is based on my experience and the readings I read online. And assuming I know what this fruit is based on smelling a fragrance that has a note of it is equivalent to my idiot friend attempting to try jjajangmyeon by poorly remaking it through an instant noodle version. This frustrates me because I think a lot of reviewers out there pretend to know what they're talking about. But I think it's much better for the viewers if you're transparent and honest about this. Anyways, every fragrance in the scent line is a different take on the fruit called maninka fruit. And here's why for her version is a problem. None of them technically have the maninka fruit as one of the notes. From what I can tell, maninka fruit has a sweet, fruity, dusty smell to it. And according to the official description, it has a dried fruit aroma and it smells like strawberries dipped in chocolate. Apparently, people also describe it as tropical sweetness. Private Accord actually tones this down compared to other fragrances in the line. And it adds notes that naturally complements maninka fruit's chocolatey sweetness with chocolate. It's very smooth and very nice. You smell a fresh ginger on the top note with fruity yet chocolatey, dusty, and bitter sweetness in the mid notes with maninka fruit, coffee, pepper, pineapple, and it becomes a very smooth dry down with cacao and vanilla and patchouli and benzoin. And reading the notes, you know this is chocolatey, but it's fresh and airy enough for non-gourmand lovers to like this as well. It's a gourmand for people who don't like gourmands. It almost smells like a citrusy Tootsie Roll. As for the occasion, I can definitely see myself wearing this at night on a chilly day, but it surprisingly doesn't project well, and it doesn't last forever, so I just spray it whenever I want to as long as it's not too hot outside. Hugo Boss Private Accord for her is a different story. Once again, I think both are pretty unisex. This one definitely does lean much more feminine, and the men's version obviously leans more masculine, but I personally will be comfortable wearing both. Remember I said for her version does not have the maninka fruit? This one neither. But what connects this to the men's version, which actually makes sense in this case, is cacao and coffee. and they brightened it up by adding mandarin orange. This is citrusy, orange dominant, powdery chocolate coffee white floral scent. So opening wise, I would argue it actually resembles the men's counterpart a lot because the cacao and coffee, as I said before, is very dominant in the men's version as well. But the magic happens when it gets to the dry down. The orange disappears and it becomes a scent of osmanthus tea with tonka. There is some generic perfume vibe to this, I'm not gonna lie, especially at the end of its life. But overall, I find this to be a sexy fragrance. I would describe the experience as eating a chocolate with a sprinkle of shaved orange peel on the top and drinking a cup of osmanthus tea afterwards. Now here's the problem. And this is a big problem. They are discontinued. And this is one of the biggest issues I have with designer fragrances. They release 20 different versions of the same fragrance, and once you get attached to one of them, they discontinue all of them. It sucks. But if you live in Europe or Asia, they are surprisingly still available on third-party websites, especially for her version. There's hundreds of bottles. And for you guys in North and South America, there's still a couple left on websites like eBay and fragrance discounter sites. And the price isn't too bad. This is good because I do have other fragrances that are in the same condition where they were discontinued and there's only a couple bottles left. And the prices for those usually skyrocket. Of course, I'm talking about Guerlain. Also, this video wasn't necessarily to make you buy this specific fragrance, but to introduce you to the scent line. As I said, they all have a very similar vibe because it revolves around the same note, but every fragrance is a different take surrounding the maninka fruit. So it's a good idea to shop around, see what kind of notes you gravitate towards. You know, I'm a person who likes leather, I'm a gourmand person, I like fresh fragrances, and see if there's a version you like. In fact, people love, I don't know what that is, love the new flanker that just came out in 2022. The scent La Parfum for him. That one drops the gourmand aspect and adds iris, leather, and woodsy notes. If you have access to smelling Hugo Boss fragrances, I do think they are a good choice because they're always there, as I said, but they're always under the radar. When people usually talk about mainstream designer fragrances, they usually talk about Gucci, Chanel, and brands like that. So ironically, you're gonna smell very different if you spray one of these fragrances from the scent line. Do you have experience with the scent line? Do you have a fragrance that you come back to every season and realize how good it is and how much you like it? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next episode. Ta-ta!